Morning, everybody. I'm Katie Luvis, Vice President of External Affairs at the Chamber for Greater Chapel Hill-Carrboro. It's my pleasure to welcome you this morning to the Economic Outlook Forum. This is the second of 10 forums as part of our 2021 Critical Issues series. Today, we'll receive timely information on the current performance and future predictions of our national, state, regional, and local economy. We have two guest speakers who will share their knowledge and expertise and give you what you need to know to make sense of this complicated time. Before we get the program started, a few housekeeping items. First, as far as staffing for today's discussion, I will serve as your host. Our Chamber President and CEO, Aaron Nelson, will moderate the discussion. And my colleagues Jensen Anderson, Vanessa Watson, and Justin Simmons will be on slides and technology. So you can rest assured that Vanessa and Jensen and Justin will apply their quick ninja moves on any potential hackers. If you have any questions or comments during the forum, we invite you to post them in the chat below. I'll be monitoring that and will help tee up your questions and comments for the discussion during the Q&A periods. As you probably noticed, your line was muted when you joined this meeting. We ask that you remain muted, but please share your video if you're comfortable doing so. We love to see your smiling faces. Today's discussion will be recorded and shared through our YouTube channel. We'll send you the link in our follow-up email after the event. This forum, like many of our forums, is free for Chamber members. If you're not a Chamber member, but you're interested in learning more, drop a note in the chat box and our Chamber staff members will be sure to follow up with you. Today's forum and the entire 2021 Critical Issues series is coordinated by the Chamber's Government Affairs Committee. The chair of the Government Affairs Committee, Betsy Brucker-Harris, would like to bring you welcome. Betsy is the IT project coordinator for Armacell, a global company that invented flexible foam and manufactures innovative technical insulation solutions that conserve energy and make a positive difference. Armacell has 300 patents, 3,000 employees, and 24 facilities around the world, including their head office for the Americas in Chapel Hill and a manufacturing facility in Mebane. Betsy?
Thank you, Katie, and good morning, everyone. On behalf of the volunteer members of the Chamber's Government Affairs Committee, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this forum, the Economic Outlook Forum. For those who are new to our events, you should know we're a learning community. While you may be tempted to just sit back, relax, we encourage you to really lean in and pose questions, engage in the discussion, use that chat that Katie mentioned. We're also a social group. So though we're not together in person, we still invite you to share your ahas in the chat and to tweet your favorite takeaways on Twitter with the hashtag #CHC Critical Issues. We'll post that in the chat as well. It's a joy for me to serve on the Chamber's Government Affairs Committee and to help coordinate these forums. In addition to these forums, our committee convenes every month to discuss policy matters and to coordinate the Chamber's collective advocacy on behalf of the local business community. We focus on four things: retaining, recruiting, and growing employers, developing a talented workforce, improving the business climate and regulatory environment, and building and maintaining infrastructure. If you're interested in getting involved, I invite you to let me or Katie know. And with that, I want to share my appreciation to our distinguished guest speakers who've joined us today, and I hope all of you enjoy the program. Back to you, Katie.
Thanks, Betsy. New this year, we're deepening our engagement with our elected officials and inviting an Orange County Commissioner to bring welcome at the top of each forum. Today, it is fitting that Commissioner and economist Dr. Jean Hamilton will join us. Commissioner Hamilton is a woman of many talents. She first earned her PhD in economics from UC Berkeley and worked as an assistant professor of economics at Occidental College in California. She went on to work as a public health researcher on issues facing young children, became a licensed clinical social worker, and now has a private psychotherapy and counseling practice in Chapel Hill. Commissioner Hamilton's public service runs deep, as she has served on the Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools Board, was a board member for Women Advance and the Art Center, is a member of the NAACP, a volunteer in local democratic politics, and a regular participant in the Triangle Insight meditation community. She was elected Orange County Commissioner in 2020 and recently began her 4-year term. Commissioner Hamilton, thank you for joining us today. Please bring welcome to our participants.
Thank you so much, Katie, for that introduction, that very generous introduction. So yes, I'm Jean Hamilton and the newly elected County Commissioner. And so on behalf of the Orange County Commissioners, I want to extend a warm welcome to all the participants attending this Economic Outlook Forum. This forum could not have come at a better time, as the governor has further eased COVID restrictions and we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. I am so excited to hear economist Dr. Michael Walden speak on the current performance and future outlook for our national, state, regional, and local economies, and so describe what that light might look like. As Katie mentioned, my first career was as an economist, and the 20+ years that I spent in the field as a student, professor, and researcher, I never imagined an economic shock like the COVID-19 pandemic. And although sometimes it feels unbelievable that this happened to us, we all know the disruption and pain caused by the virus and the need to shut down our economy. As a social worker, I learned to find the opportunity in a crisis. So for me, this crisis has revealed the importance of the public sector and the private sectors working together to support our economy and our people. Orange County government has provided grants and loans to local businesses. It's provided emergency housing and utility support to residents. It's worked hard to provide COVID testing and COVID vaccines to residents, especially the underserved. And of course, we could not have done this without the funds from the federal and state governments. This crisis also revealed the need for better broadband access in our rural areas, and so there's a task force working on solutions. We have a task force looking at long-term economic recovery, and we also continue to look at our structural issues, right? Look for economic development and opportunities to diversify our tax base. And we have made strides and need to continue. So I thank the Chamber so much for hosting this important forum and wish everyone good health and a productive meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Hamilton. Now it is my pleasure to recognize our sponsors whose support makes today's forum and the entire 2021 Critical Issues series possible. First, Chapel Hill Media Group, including 97.9 The Hill and chapelboro.com. 97.9 The Hill WCHL is your local radio station and Chapel Hill's oldest, most reliable broadcaster. The station, 97.9 FM and 1360 AM, features excellent programming for the greater Chapel Hill-Carrboro region, including local news, sports, and talk shows, alternative music, and CBS News reports. You can find all that and more on chapelboro.com, your daily local news source. Today, we're delighted to have Chapel Hill Media Group News Director and host of News on the Hill, Brighton McConnell. Brighton, please bring welcome.
Good morning, Katie. Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for having us. Chapel Hill Media Group is just very happy to be a presenting sponsor for this 2021 Critical Issues series. It has a lot of information that we are going to be monitoring, and we want to make sure the rest of the community knows, and everybody who's here today also wants to know it too. So these kinds of forums are crucial for just keeping people informed, and we're very happy to support that. I want to invite everybody to tune into my afternoon show today at 4:30. I'm going to be talking with Dr. Walden and Aaron Nelson as they share some of the top takeaways from our discussion this morning. And then you can also check chapelboro.com later for Katie Luvis's article that's going to share some additional key insights from today's forum. And a few other updates on stuff that we've got going on here at Chapel Media Group. We're running a great event right now called Lucky to Be Local, where you can submit your favorite local businesses in various categories. And when you do so, you'll be entered to win a pot of gold full of fun prizes like gift cards. And as always, we've got lots of great local news coverage on topics from our community's ongoing response to COVID-19, to various local government projects going on, and sharing the stories of community members across our region. And that will, of course, include important information like what we're going to be learning here today. So with that, I hope everybody enjoys the program. And Katie, thank you again for having us here.
Thanks, Brighton and Chapel Hill Media Group. Next up, Duke Energy. Did you know that Duke Energy is one of the largest energy holding companies in the United States? They provide power to nearly 10 million customers across half a dozen states, and they were named one of the world's most admired companies by Fortune magazine in 2020 and one of America's best employers by Forbes in 2019. They're building a smarter energy future, and we appreciate their support for these thoughtful forums. With us today to bring welcome is Duke Energy Director of Large Accounts Management and our Chamber Board Vice President, Vakisha Graves. Vakisha, always great to see you. Please bring welcome.
Good morning, Katie, and thank you so much. And thanks everyone for your attendance today. At Duke Energy, it's vitally important that we support the communities that we serve. So we are so pleased and proud to be one of the sponsors of the Critical Issues series. We hope everyone enjoys today's Economic Outlook Forum. The Chamber has done an exceptional job all year, starting out in 2021 already with providing great topics for everyone to discuss, to deliberate, and to enjoy. Today will be no different, so we hope everybody has a great time, and away we go. Thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Vakisha. And finally, Durham Tech. Durham Tech is the community college that serves our workforce needs here in Orange County. They have a beautiful 20-acre, 40,000 square foot campus centrally located in Orange County near Hill-Carrboro. And they just recently secured funding from the Orange County Commissioners to begin planning the expansion of that campus. With us today is Durham Tech President, JB Buxton. JB, we're glad to have you. Please bring welcome.
Katie, thank you very much. And we're proud members of the Chamber and proud sponsors of this forum and what it does to bring our community together on some important issues. I do want to note that Jackie Crone, our Orange County Campus Director, I think is with us today, as is Melissa Chappell, our Foundation Director. And we are really pleased to be here today. We are excited. I want to borrow a note from Commissioner Hamilton to begin to see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. And we're doing some planning for the fall that's going to allow us to come back much more in person. You know, we've been in person. If you've been to the Orange County campus, you would have seen basic law enforcement training, an outstanding partnership we have with Sheriff Blackwood and the Sheriff's Office, EMS training. And we've been in person, but we've been more constrained. The COVID has created some caps. We're looking forward to opening that up and creating more opportunity for folks in the local community. I've talked often, it's kind of a broken record, but I want to make sure people hear often about our back to work courses and how we're trying to give people an opportunity who have been in sectors that have been hurt by COVID, a chance to move into sectors that are still in demand in the region. But one of the reasons today is so important is because it gives us a sense of not just when the economy is coming back, but how it is coming back post-COVID. And we're doing a lot of work with the Chamber, with Orange County government to try to understand the ways in which the economy is shifting as a result of COVID and some of the acceleration in COVID. So as we think about not only the occupations and sectors in demand now that will continue to see strong demand, but where the projected demand is coming. And that's why a conversation like today and like some listening sessions we're going to be doing in the coming month, thanks to the Chamber, are so critical. So thank you very much for your leadership, and we're proud to be a part of it.
Thanks, JB. All right, now onto the program. As I mentioned before, Chamber President and CEO Aaron Nelson will moderate our discussion today. Aaron has led the Chamber for 20 years. He's a Carolina grad, and he's always quick with a joke or an insightful comment. Aaron, take it away.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you for being our MC today and for organizing this and convening our speakers. It's my pleasure to, in a moment, introduce Dr. Walden. For some expectation management, what the rest of this program holds for you is we're going to have a first segment. It's going to be with Dr. Walden. He's going to share his forecast, talk to us about what's happening on the state, national, and local level, and then we'll do some Q&A. Don't need to hold your questions. Drop them into that chat. Dr. Walden, no need to follow the chat. Katie will keep up with it, and we'll ask you the questions afterwards. When we're done with that, I've been asked to share a sort of overview about how the Orange County economy works. What are the key components that make the Orange County economy go, and we can apply what Dr. Walden had talked about to the local mechanics of our economy. And then we've also just completed our annual economic conditions survey of local small businesses with over 100 respondents, and we'll share with you what local business think is happening in our community. So now let me introduce to you Dr. Walden. He is back by popular demand. This is one of our most popular events, and Dr. Walden joined us. He was our first Zoom meeting a year ago when we moved into this new world. He is the William Neal Reynolds Distinguished Professor and Extension Economist at North Carolina State University, where he has worked since 1978, has his PhD from Cornell. He has published 12 books, 300 articles and reports, including North Carolina in the Connected Age. I'd like to add, he has also written 3 economic thrillers. Should any of you want to get into those, there is Macro Mayhem and Micro Mischief and Fiscal Fiasco, all designed to teach economics in an interesting way. You all may have seen or heard him on the radio or read his articles. He's appeared nationally and internationally on many different forms of media, NBC, CBS, etc., published in more than 40 newspapers across the state in his biweekly column. Recipient of numerous awards, including the Order of the Longleaf Pine and the Board of Governors Award for Excellence in Public Service. We are very fortunate that he has taken time out of his super busy schedule to join us today. Dr. Walden, so grateful to have you again. Welcome. Please take control of our screen.
All right, thank you, Aaron. And let me get things enrolling here. Let me go ahead and give you a little preface. While I thought I had everything right, it is not working that way, but I will get them right. It is a pleasure to be with you again. It is true that I think a little over a year ago, I was asked to speak again to the group, and I willingly did that. And let's see, I'm not getting a shared screen situation. Let me see. Katie, do we have the capability to just go ahead and load it on your side?
We do. Look at that. Vanessa's already got the jump on me.
Okay. And I'll just.
What a team. Teamwork.
All right. Let Vanessa do that, and then I will just tell her when we want to move ahead. The economy, I think, is we're much more optimistic about the economy today than we were a year ago. In fact, as I recall my comments a year ago, I think they were laced with a lot of uncertainty. We were going through something we'd never have experienced in this country in at least 100 years, and certainly not in our country in the modern economy, which most economists peg as being since World War II. The medical people were surprised, and again, every virus, at least that I've read about, every virus is different. Every pandemic is different. So, if you recall last year, I think there was a lot of interest and a lot of hope that the virus would be wrapped up within a couple of months, maybe 4 months. Obviously, that did not happen. We've had an extraordinary amount of change, unfortunately, an extraordinary amount of death. We've had an extraordinary amount of government involvement in trying to ease the pain of this virus. Where are we, Katie, on the slide set?
We are now on the second slide that says
the
virus is.
Okay, I'm not seeing that.
Well, that will be hard if you're unable to see your screen. Let's just pause for a moment and see.
Well, I can call it up on my side, and I'll just say go to the next slide. So we're on slide number 2. The virus is retreating, the economy is gaining. Is that right?
Perfect.
That is correct.
All right. Let's continue, just so everyone sees it. So where we are now, thank you. I apologize for the technical issues. Although I'm at a university that's known for its technology, I'm not part of that technology. We do think the virus, we're making improvement. You can see bullet point 1, cases, hospitalization, deaths seem to be trending down. Now, I think there's been a little bit of disappointment in the last couple of days. I think the best news that vaccinations are quickly increasing. I think we're just shy, if I recall, 17, 18% of the population has been totally vaccinated. I think 40% have at least had one vaccination. As several of my predecessors in speaking mentioned, we are seeing restrictions easing. We are seeing jobs and economic activity trending higher, and I'll give you some slides on that later. Federal government, of course, has been very, very active. And I think, in my opinion, if I can give you my opinion, appropriately so, in intervening in the economy, trying to help people and businesses who have been hurt, trying to ease the pain. We'll talk about that. And so there are hopes, I think, for normalcy or light at the end of the tunnel, if you will. Being here within this year, the president, of course, has indicated he would hope that we can all celebrate the 4th of July with friends and family. But I think maybe by fall we'll be close to normalcy. The campuses, my campus, NC State, I think Chapel Hill the same way, are planning for more in-campus instruction. All right, next slide. I do, although I am an optimistic person, I try to be realistic. And I do think we do have a worry, and that is the variants. I read yesterday about, I forget what country, they have now discovered a variant that's actually 2 variants in one. And this is apparently common for viruses to mutate and change. They're tough little cookies. And of course, Europe, who is behind us in vaccinations, is struggling with the variants. Many European countries have reimposed very strict economic controls. We've had some indications of variants popping up in parts of our country, but thus far, I think at least the experts that I've heard suggest that there does not appear to be another surge around the corner. But I do think we need to, in my opinion, just my opinion, I've been totally vaccinated, but I still wear masks everywhere I go. I'm still very cautious about keeping my distance, washing my hands, etc. And this is outside my lane, but just Walden's personal behavior is it's really not changed. I'm still very, very cautious, and I would recommend that for everyone. Next slide, please. Now, we have gone through a recession. Dr. Hamilton knows, as a professional economist, the recession is defined as simply a period of time where the economy moves backwards. Typically, our economy moves forward, at least in terms of the macro metrics, things like employment, sales, production, aggregated income. Of course, it doesn't, even when we're in an expansion, every business, every area doesn't prosper at the same rate. So we always have economic issues. But generally speaking, economies move forward over time, and ours is one of those. But we periodically have cases where we go backwards. There's some event like the housing collapse of 2007, 2009, savings and loan bust of the late 1990s, the tech bust. We had a couple of recessions in the 70s that were due to geopolitical events happening in the Middle East and dramatic restrictions on oil. This recession has been unique in that it's been, it's been about 60 years. We actually had a recession in the late 50s that was caused by a pandemic. It was called the Asian flu. I was a young person, about 8 years old. I lived through that, didn't realize I was living through it. But I do know about my father, who had a small business, lost his small business during that recession and never recovered. The rest of his life, he worked as an employee for someone else, which he did not like. He was never able to get the funds and financing to recover his small business. But this recession we've gone through and this pandemic has been much, much deeper. If you look at the data, and I'm going to show you data in just a moment, the recession, and this is a forecast that economists got right. Anytime economists are right, we sing it because we're certainly not always right. But we did get this right in that we thought that the recession induced by what we had to do to control the virus and the pandemic. And of course, the big worry was this was such a contagious virus that it could spread rapidly and overwhelm the hospital system. And we didn't want that to happen. So the notion was we had to take a pause in the economy. We had to limit personal interactions. In most states, people were told to stay home unless they were working in essential businesses. Many sectors of our economy, like hospitality, were literally shut down. So the notion is we had to do this in order to get a control over the virus. But that said, economists thought that we would have a recession. We would go through a period of time where the economy moved backwards, but we thought it would be a deep recession, but a very short recession. And it appears that has been the case. In fact, if you look at this metric, next slide, I'm looking at the change in employment in the US on the left side of the slide and in North Carolina on the right side of the slide. And notice April. April was a devastating month. We lost 20 million jobs at the national level. We lost about 600,000 jobs in North Carolina. Just a little story here. I was contacted by one of our senators in the legislature who wanted me to develop some ideas for an aid package for businesses in North Carolina. This was before the federal government intervened with their programs. And of course, key to those estimates of how much it would cost would be how many jobs we would lose in North Carolina. And I can remember throughout late March and early April, I think my first estimate was 200,000. And then as the numbers came in, it was worse. I think I got to 400,000. And I think my final estimate was maybe 500,000. Of course, we actually surpassed that, 600,000 jobs. But if you look on the slide, both of these slides, or both of these pictures, you see that once we got through April, and I think it was toward the middle or end of May in most states, including North Carolina, the view was that we had put in place a system to control the virus. We hadn't overwhelmed the hospitalization system, and we could ease up on some of the restrictions. And you can see that was reflected then in that we started to recover jobs. Certainly not all the jobs we lost, but we started to recover jobs. And you can see May, June, very good months in terms of job gains in North Carolina and the US. Now notice at the far end of the slides, and some of these are hard to read, we haven't had a lot of improvement at the national level really since November. And in North Carolina, January was a very mild month. We actually lost a few non-farm jobs. And I think this is due to the resurgence of the virus at the end of 2020. So when you see my future slides, I'm going to be optimistic about going forward. Next slide, please. Now here I'm introducing data for the Durham Chapel Hill Metro. And the reason we use metros is we get much more up-to-date data. And of course, certainly you're in Orange County and you're Chapel Hill, but you know your economy is broader than that. So I think it's appropriate to look at metro areas here. And what I've done on this slide is I'm looking at job change in a slightly different way. I'm looking at it in terms of change as a percent of the jobs that we had in each of these three geographical areas pre-pandemic, which would have been February. So for example, if you look at the March numbers in all these areas, there was about a 1% drop. That means that we had about a 1% drop in jobs, 1% of the February totals in March. And again, you can see April just devastating. 14% drop in the nation, about 12% in North Carolina. And Chapel Hill did a little better, although this is nothing. I mean, still devastating, 11% drop. But again, you can see once we got past April, once we had some easing of restrictions, we have had gains, although those gains have gotten much smaller at the end of 2020. Next slide, please. Unemployment rates, peak unemployment rates in the nation, April. Again, 15%, just totally amazing. A little bit lower here in North Carolina, a little bit lower yet in Chapel Hill. You're the turquoise number. And we've had improvement in unemployment rates since April. And right now we're sitting at North Carolina and the US are around 6%. You're lower, as was mentioned before. I do want to say something though about these unemployment numbers. Most economists, there's the joke, line up 10 economists, you'll get 10 different opinions. But this is an area where most economists are in unison in that we think and we believe that the unemployment rate numbers right now are understating what I'm going to call true unemployment. And I just have to digress a minute. It'll only take a minute, but I think this is important. Most people think that the unemployment numbers come in each state, come from the number of people filing for unemployment claims. You know that happens. Someone loses their job, they can file in North Carolina with the Employment Security Commission to get some monthly help in terms of a check. Most people think that's where the unemployment numbers come from. That is not the case. That is absolutely not the case. The federal government runs a separate survey, which they conduct nationally, and then they have data for each state. They survey about 100,000 people, workers nationwide. This has been going on since the 1930s. And they ask three crucial questions in determining whether to count someone as employed or unemployed. First, they say, do you have a job? If the person says yes, then they're done. They're counted as employed. Second question, however, if the person says they don't have a job, they say, do you want a job? Now, everyone who doesn't have a job wants a job. My wife is a good example. She was a public school teacher for 33 years. She's been retired for going on 14 years, and she does not want to work anymore. She put her time in, and if I can render an opinion, I think public school teachers are hardest working people in the economy. So we wouldn't want to count her as unemployed. So if someone says, however, that they want a job, then the third question is, have you looked for a job in the last month? If the person says no, they're actually not counted as unemployed. And these have been the rules forever. This is not something recent. These have been the rules forever. And the reason for that third question, if you go back and look at the start of these statistics, which was in the 1930s, the people that were developing the statistics in the 30s wanted to make sure that there was some intensity of desire for the person to get a job. They were worried about people saying, yeah, I want a job, but not really being serious about it. And so they came up with this question. Now, the concern right now, and since the pandemic's been with us, is that there are many people who are without a job. They may have lost their job. They want a job, but they've not been out looking because they're afraid of getting COVID. They maybe have had COVID or had a relative with COVID they have to take care of, or very importantly, they may have children that are home from school. They're learning virtually, but the parent has to be there with them, and they can't go out and look for a job. What I'm getting at with all this is most economists think that what I'm going to term the true unemployment rate, which would mean to include people like I just mentioned as unemployed, would probably add about 1.5 to 2 percentage points. So we have improved, but we're not quite as good as these numbers would indicate. Now, I do think that'll get better. The actual unemployment, the measured unemployment rate or the official unemployment rate, and the real unemployment rate, as I'm terming, I think they're going to get closer together as we move on and we get more people vaccinated and more people feel comfortable going out looking for work, and possibly as we get young people in school. Next slide, please. Now, this is an interesting slide that focuses in on Orange County. I found this very fascinating. What I'm tracking here is monthly taxable sales and purchases. This is derived from the North Carolina Department of Revenue, and of course, they're involved in collecting sales taxes. And if you, they give you data on sales taxes, but they also give you data on the quantity of taxable sales. So that's a measure of, obviously, we'll say retail sales. And what I've done here is I've gone through each month and I've stacked 2019 and 2020 together so that you can see month by month. These are not seasonally adjusted. So if you look at, for example, April, notice the red line, which is 2020. A big dip, big reduction in April retail sales in, I'm going to call this retail sales now, retail sales in Orange County, well below their level from a year before, 2019. And I think it's reasonable to say, well, clearly that's the impact of the shutdown orders and the stay-at-home orders, et cetera. Now, look, however, at May, gigantic jump in retail sales in Orange County in May from April, and furthermore, much higher in May 2020 than in May of 2019. And yet we're in the middle of a pandemic. So what's going on? the stimulus checks started to come through. The additional money going for people who are unemployed. The federal government has had a big program where they have supplemented the state money that an unemployed person gets. So this is if you read about, if you look at national numbers, you see the same thing. And this has been the power of the financial assistance the federal government has pushed into the economy in keeping and trying to keep the economy afloat. Then if you look beyond May, you can see that still in June and July, the 2020 numbers were above 2019. Now notice in September, the 2020 numbers dipped below 2019, and I attribute that to the fact that August and September for Chapel Hill, Orange County, are big months when students come back, and they spend, and they didn't come back in August and September. At least most of them didn't come back, and so your sales were well under in 2020 what they would have been what they were in 2019. And then finally, if you look at the end of the chart, which is December, November, and December of the years, you can see again that the 2020 numbers are higher than the 2019. This is the what did we get? $600. Yeah, this is the $600 stimulus checks, and there was also a replenishment of the federal supplement for unemployed workers. So I think this chart shows the power, or at least the intended power, of the federal programs to at least try to keep the economy from sinking even more than what it would have. And you can see that, at least based on this slide, they were at least successful in some months in doing that. Next slide. Now, I think all of you, given that you are part of the chamber and you're in a variety of businesses or educational institutions, know that this has not been a recession where every sector has been affected in the same way. We've probably seen more differences in impacts among sectors in this recession than at least any recession that I've watched during my 43 years as a professional economist. What I've done here is give you, for most of the key sectors, I'm giving you two numbers, one for April of 2020, the other for January of 2021. And what the numbers indicate is the percentage of jobs in that sector as a percentage of the jobs that existed pre-pandemic, which again is, I'm using February of 2020. So for example, we look at the first line. In April, we had about 90% of the jobs that we had in February, meaning that we lost 10% of the jobs. In 2021, we've gotten back half of that loss. We're sitting here at about 95%. Incidentally, these are for Orange County. But look at construction, manufacturing, retail trade, information, financial services, professional services. Yes, they were all impacted at the height of the recession in 2020, but they're largely back. In fact, several of them, you can see, construction, information, and professional services are actually back even more. They've actually added jobs compared to where they were pre-pandemic. Education, health, not a lot of change. Now, the two sectors that were most affected and continue to be most affected, I have highlighted in red: leisure, hospitality, and other services. These are sectors that, among all of them, entail a lot of personal interaction. These are sectors where, in many cases, particularly in leisure hospitality, they were told to actually close their doors, restaurants, bars, etc. And you can see the impact of that in April of 2020. Again, in Orange County, the leisure hospitality sector lost almost half of its jobs from when at the depth of the pandemic, or at least the pandemic recession. So in April 2020, there were only 54% of the jobs in leisure hospitality in Orange County that existed in February of 2020. Now they have come back. You can see going across to January 2021, they're now at 68%, but that's clearly well off the return for the sectors above it. And then a similar trend for other services. Most of these would be personal services, hair salons, gyms, et cetera. Lost 25% of their jobs in April. They've come back. They're down about 11% from where they were in February of 2020. Now, I do think these are, for those two highlighted sectors, I do think we're going to see tremendous improvement coming up, given the governor's recent rule to allow greater capacity in restaurants and gyms, et cetera. So I do think that 68 and 89% number will improve. A big question, though, is whether those sectors will return to their pre-pandemic levels, and I will talk about that in a moment. Next slide, please. Now, let me talk a little bit about what the federal government has done. The federal government's done a lot. With the passage of the American Rescue Plan, the 1.9 trillion, federal government over the course of a year has pumped or has appropriated $6 trillion to help with the pandemic, help with the medical issues, the educational issues, the economic issues of the pandemic. Now, all this is not will not have been spent through this year. You've heard stories that some of the monies will go into 2022, but the federal government has appropriated $6 trillion. This is all borrowed. North Carolina, when you add all the monies from that $6 trillion, is on tap to have received, either have received or will receive a total of $48 billion. The latest American Rescue Plan, I think North Carolina will receive $9 billion. Now, there's been a trade-off here. A lot of people contact me and say, Walden, aren't the Chinese, haven't we borrowed this from the Chinese? Aren't they going to want it back sooner rather than later? Or they say, how can we pay this, adding all this to debt? Well, those are not the two problems. First of all, about 2/3 of this money has been borrowed from the Federal Reserve. And how's the Federal Reserve do that? They create money. And I'll talk about the potential cost of that in a moment. Secondly, due to the fact that interest rates have been and continue to be very, very low, and Chairman Powell of the Federal Reserve says he wants to keep them low. If you look at the debt payments, interest payments on the national debt, where we are right now, we are lower, about half of what we were in the 1980s and 1990s. So we do have some room there to absorb this debt. I think, and many economists think, the big cost to this, however, is we have borrowed money from the future and using it now, which means that money is not going to be available in the future for spending and investment. So that means the economy will likely grow somewhat slower in the future than it would have now, than it would have had if we hadn't done the borrowing. In fact, the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania estimates that beginning in 2023, the economy will grow, but it'll grow about 10% slower than it would have without this borrowing. And so we've had a trade-off here. The question was, do we borrow from the future? Do we have somewhat slower growth in the future in order to save a big part of the economy today? And again, Walden's personal view is, yeah, that was a trade-off I would recommend making, but others may have a different view. Next slide, please. All right, now let me do talk about some long-run worries, though. One worry is whether, if you look at, we have data, a lot of data now on the first stimulus plan a year ago. There were $2,000 checks that wanted to keep them. About 1/3 of that money was saved, invested, and we think a lot of that money went into the stock market. So the question is, has the stock market, which of course has done very, very well, contrary to what a lot of people would expect, very, very well over the last year. But the concern is, has it been artificially inflated due to this money flowing from the government? And when that flow stops, will we have a pullback in stocks? I'm not someone who tries to predict future trends in the stock market. All I want to do, though, is highlight that that is a major concern that a lot of people in the investment world have. Second concern is with the fact that the Federal Reserve has effectively financed the stimulus plans through printing money. And of course, it's done digitally now. Traditionally, historically, when a central bank prints money at rapid rates, you do have a rise in inflation in the future. And you're hearing a lot of people talk about this. One very prominent person who's been mentioning this is Larry Summers, who was former president of Harvard. He was President Obama's head of the National Economic Council. He was President Clinton's Treasury Secretary. So when Larry Summers talks, I listen. And he has written several articles saying he's worried that we may see a bubbling up of inflation. Now, how much? Well, I think we're talking about maybe the 1% to 2% that we now have, maybe going to 3% to 4%. So I'm not talking about hyperinflation, but I do think that should be something on your radar screen. And if you're a business person, plan for maybe your costs going up a little faster, and then you have to decide how do you respond in terms of prices, et cetera. So I think that's something to concern. And then there's another concern, will that translate into a lower value international dollar? Although I should say if that happens, that actually helps us in our trade balance because it makes our exports more competitive. And finally, I want to mention that some of you, I'm sure Dr. Hamilton's well familiar with this. There's a term being bandied around called modern monetary theory. And one of the things I like about economics is we don't just sit and continue to teach the same thing all the time. There are smart people out there who are constantly reviewing economic theory and economic ideas and say, well, maybe the world works this way. In a nutshell, what modern monetary theory says is if you can borrow tons of money, trillions of dollars in your economy. If you put that money to work that increases the productivity of people and businesses, then you won't have higher inflation because you'll grow the economy faster. And I think we're going to have a debate about this. It's probably not going to be in press conferences, et cetera, but I think underlying the Biden administration's plans to, for example, come out with a $3 trillion infrastructure package, potentially a lot of that will be borrowed. This is going to put that test. This is going to be a test of that theory. Because if we spend trillions of dollars on improving our transportation system, improving educational system, et cetera, you could argue that's going to make us more productive. It's going to make workers more productive, and we could actually grow our way faster where we don't have to worry about inflation. So I'll just throw that out. I think that's just from a professional economist view, that's a very interesting idea. All right, next slide, and I'm going to hurry up here. One of the things that we had in the past American Rescue Plan that we didn't have in the previous bills was a $350 billion component that goes to state and local governments. We did have money going to state and local governments in the previous bills, but they had strings attached to them. This has some strings, but it has fewer strings, and it is designed to help states and locals fill holes in their revenues if they had lost revenues due to the recession. Already today, I saw in the News and Observer, the governor was talking about his ideas for spending some of this money. And of course, we'll have a big debate in North Carolina, and Chapel Hill, I'm sure, will get some money. So that's going to be something that elected leaders like Dr. Hamilton will have to discuss and decide on how to allocate. But that is new. That is something we've not seen in the previous stimulus bills. Next slide. All right, in terms of my forecast, I am optimistic. I do think that we're coming back. This is my leading index for the state as long as the line's going up. It's good, and you can see that line has been going up on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. Here's my forecast for the path of North Carolina's real GDP. Translated, that means the value of everything we produce in the state. You can see the big dip in the second quarter. Fairly fast recovery in the third quarter, and I'm looking for the economy to improve hereafter. Notice that by the third quarter of this year, I'm predicting that we will fully be back in terms of our aggregate production in the economy in North Carolina. Next slide. Different story with unemployment. We did have a big jump in unemployment. We've had a good recovery. Now, notice in the first part of this year, I would not be surprised to see some rises in the unemployment rate, even though we're adding jobs. Now you might say, well, then how can that happen? Well, go back and remember what I talked about for people who are really truthfully unemployed, but they're not counted as unemployed because they're not looking for work. As we get more people vaccinated, as maybe children go back to school, as COVID disappears, those folks are going to go out and look for work. And until they do get work, they're going to be counted as unemployed. So don't be surprised if we have some months where the unemployment rate goes up. What I always tell people, look at the jobs. Are we adding jobs? That's the key. But notice if you look on the far right-hand side, I'm not looking for a return to that sub 4% unemployment rate. I think there's going to be a lot of disruptions, a lot of change in the workforce. In fact, let's go to the next slide. I do think that, as the great president of Durham Tech mentioned, we are going to have to be very, very watchful of how the labor market changes. And this is an area where economists are also in unison. We think the post-pandemic economy is not going to be the same as the pre-pandemic economy. And I'm going to be very blunt here. A lot of businesses are going to look at human workers and they're going to say, I love working with people. I love my workers, but I know now there's a risk there. There's a health risk. If they get sick, if we have another pandemic, could have to shut down. I could lose my business. I think that's going to be on a lot of work, on a lot of business owners' minds. And so we think there's going to be an acceleration. It's already been occurring, but an acceleration for businesses to try to find ways to use fewer workers. And that's probably going to be in terms of technology and machinery. So I think I'm looking ahead and thinking that we're going to have a large number of people in North Carolina, maybe in the tens of thousands, who actually wake up one day and their job's not there and they need to be reskilled to get to do something else. And they can't. And a lot of these folks are going to be older, 30s, 40s, still seems young to me at age 70, anything under 70 seems young, but they're going to be mid-career, families to support, bills to pay. They can't spend years learning a new skill. So we're going to have to rely a lot on our great community colleges. We're going to have to rely on collaborations with businesses, apprenticeships, on-the-job training. And I think we need to be proactive. We don't want to wait until someone shows up at the unemployment line. I think as soon as we hear of a massive reconfiguration of a sector, like food processing, we've already seen in some states robots replacing people in food processing plants, and that's a big industry in North Carolina. We need to be ready for that. Next slide. I think education, my sector, I think we're going to continue to have distance learning. It's been more of an issue, of course, at K through 12, but I cut K through 12 a lot of slack here because they weren't prepared for this. My sector, we've been doing distance learning for a decade. I think we're going to have more distance learning at all levels, and I think it will get much better. I think at K through 12, however, there will be choices. Next slide. Teleworking, that is here to stay. Pre-pandemic, it was around 8%. Peak of the pandemic, it was 40% of people working from home at least one day a week. I think it's going to settle between 20 and 30%, which is still a big increase. And I think that's going to cause, again, a remaking of the business world. Next slide. Delivery of products. We've had a lot of people getting a lot of things delivered. The next step is drone delivery. In fact, the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, just approved drone delivery. The first, I think there are 3 steps. The drone people who want to do that, businesses want to do that, just got approval for the first step. So I think we're going to see more of that. Next slide. And then lastly, I think that geographical economists think that one of the long-lasting impacts of the pandemic is going to be people maybe shifting where they live. Now, I'm not predicting the end of cities, and especially I'm not predicting the end of cities in North Carolina, but I do think, and we already have some evidence, that people are looking more at suburbs, exurbs to live. Some of that's a reaction to the pandemic and density, et cetera. But especially if you can distance work, doesn't really matter where you live. So I think in terms of development, residential development, I think we'll see some changes there. All right, lastly and finally, implications, long-run implications for Chapel Hill and the Triangle. I can't conceive of living in a better area for a lot of reasons, but certainly in terms of our economy. Look at all the announcements that have been made in just the last 2 or 3 months of businesses coming to the Triangle, of commercial expansion, billions of dollars of announcements. This is a very unique area, a very positive area. I think it's anchored obviously in our great institutions of higher learning, but also North Carolina's come through. I mean, obviously we've suffered deaths, we've suffered job losses, but if you look at our metrics on those 2 key factors, we're at about in the top third of states that have done better. That is, we've had lower death rates, lower job loss rates. So I think North Carolina is going to come out of this with a very good reputation as what I call a safe state. And if someone's coming here to North Carolina business, I mean, clearly the triangle is going to get a look. So I'm very optimistic about this area, including Chapel Hill, for future economic growth. All right, and lastly, all authors have to plug their books. I did have 2 books published since I last talked to you. One is a policy book called Real Solutions. Another is I dabble in fiction. This is a political thriller called Disunia. Those are both available at the regular site. So I will stop. I've gone a little bit over, but I'll be happy to address questions. Thank you.
Absolutely fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. Katie, there were a couple of questions in the chat. We asked Dr. Walden.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Walden. Well done again. Tim Dalton with Truist asked about when you were talking about the stock market potentially being overpriced. He was wondering if you have an opinion or any insights on vacation properties, beach, mountain, lake houses. He's wondering if they might also be overinflated and due for a correction in price.
Well, that's a good question. Let me preface it by saying that one of the sectors of the economy that's done very well is the housing market, particularly housing sales. Housing prices have gone up very, very strongly. I don't think we're in a situation, and I've had this question posed to me in another way. People have said, well, Walden, it looks like we're going through the same thing we went through pre-Great Recession, where we had a spike in housing prices and then a big drop. It's different now. If you look at the balance sheets of people, households, very, very good, whereas they were out of whack in terms of too much debt prior to the Great Recession. Housing prices have gone up primarily because a lot of people wanted to buy homes, not just because maybe they've had stimulus checks, but because of lower interest rates. Also, the millennial generation is moving to a place in terms of their age where you typically see households who may have been renting start to move into ownership. So I don't think in terms of the general housing market that we're overpriced. Now, in terms of vacation, either on the beach or the mountains, I don't see a big problem there. Again, I could be wrong. A lot of this has been driven by, again, the population aging, the baby boomers aging, and people moving into retirement, and that's still going to go on. I don't think that I just don't see a crash there. I mean, clearly there can be pullbacks, minor pullbacks, but I'm not as worried about residential housing, whether it be vacation or non-vacation, as I am the stock market.
Excellent. We have time for a few more questions, and then for the rest of you, we do promise to have you out by 10. Next section is going to be a deep dive on what's happening in Orange County and surrounding areas. Katie, what was another question?
There's 2 more questions if we have the time. Staying with this real estate line of thinking, Dr. Walden, Matt Nash with Blackballed Giving Fund asked about, with so many people moving out of the cities during the pandemic and into the suburbs and seeing a rising housing prices there, is it your opinion that more people will be returning to the cities and we'll have some sort of equilibrium in the real estate market?
Well, I think here in North Carolina, I'm not worried about the cities depopulating. I mean, if I lived in New York, New Jersey metro area, I'd be worried. But I don't think we're going to see that in North Carolina. I think Charlotte, Raleigh, Chapel Hill, Durham, all of our major cities are going to continue to grow, mainly because I actually think that North Carolina has been on a path to have substantial population growth over the next several decades. I think my latest projection had our population in 2050 around 13 million. We're around 10 million now. I think we could see that even higher. And I think as long as we bring in particularly young people who are attracted to our universities, attracted to tech jobs, I think we'll keep our cities full. I don't think they will have grown as much as they would have without the pandemic, but I think we'll keep them full. Where I think we could see a big game changer is in more distant locations. If we can solve the high-speed internet problem, and I think look for the Biden infrastructure plan as to whether there's going to be money there. It's estimated we need about $200 billion devoted to high-speed internet to serve everyone wherever they live. Also watch Elon Musk. He's the guy behind the idea of low orbiting satellites that are only 500 to 600 miles up, providing internet. He argues he's going to have his prototypes ready by the end of the year. Watch that. That could be a big, big positive game changer in terms of access to high-speed internet. And if that works, then we could have situations where, again, a household who wants to remotely work can live pretty much anywhere. And we may see this could help our small towns in North Carolina. This could help close somewhat that urban-rural divide. So that's an area that I have a lot of interest to see how that works out and how these technological changes could reconfigure where people live. But no, cities in North Carolina are not going to empty out. No.
Katie, let's do the last two.
Okay. We've gotten a few more questions through the chat. And so if we don't get to them right now with Dr. Walden, rest assured that we can try and get to them at the next Q&A period after Aaron's presentation. But Lori Pellicelli, the head of our Visitors Bureau, was wondering, Dr. Walden, if you have any predictions or opinions on air travel versus shorter automobile trips. So thinking about tourism.
Yeah, I'm worried about air travel. It's coming back. I don't think it's going to be fully back for a while. You may have seen that I believe RDU had its credit rating downgraded. Airlines I think there's some money in the American Rescue Plan, more money for the airline industry. Yeah, I think, in fact, use personal example, my wife and I have been talking about, well, can we finally go somewhere this summer? And we've talked about road trips, auto trips rather than plane trips. So yeah, I think a lot of people are still going to be on the sidelines for air flights. Now I have friends who traveled, so Walden, no problem, not a problem. But yeah, I think we probably, in terms of comparing those two, we'll see more people this summer taking shorter road trips and fewer people taking airline trips. And I think that should help North Carolina. People from Tennessee, people from my home state, Ohio, driving down to North Carolina, our great mountains, our beaches, et cetera. So I think that could actually help North Carolina's tourist industry this summer.
Dr. Walden, this has been wonderful. We're going to pivot to, a few more slides on what's going on locally, our economic condition survey, and then you and I will take some additional questions at the end. Miles Fitch, we saw your question, and we will see if we can get to that at the end. Katie, do you see my presentation? And it looks like it's supposed to.
Yes, we see it.
So let's talk a little bit about our local economy and how it works. And the first thing is, it's not a local economy. It is a regional economy. If we were to draw a fence line around Orange County, our economy wouldn't work well at all. As you know, that 80% of the folks in Chatham County drive out of Chatham County in a pre-pandemic time to go to work in some other county. Every morning, 47,000 people would drive into Orange County from some other county. And every morning, 37,000 people would wake up in Orange County and drive out to somewhere else. We know how unemployment works also, y'all, is that unemployment is recorded in your county of residence, not in your county of work. So were we to have massive layoffs, for example, in Orange County, we might see the unemployment go up in Alamance and Chatham. Similarly, when sometimes there's big changes in the park, we see Orange County unemployment fluctuate. Our key economic drivers in our community are not a surprise to many of you. It is education, our public school system, and our university. It is med, our healthcare system, and incredible work that's going on in that space with our hospital, and bed. So that is us living here, our real estate market, as well as tourism as a key part of our local economy. I think it also could boil down to talking about employment and enrollment. Our economy is driven by the wages that people are making in the places where they work, and then what's happening at our university. I'm going to get a little bit more into the impact of depopulating campus, some of those other. We have emerging innovation, technology, and manufacturing also as emerging and growing parts of the local economy here in Orange County. But again, most of our local economy is driven by wages that are paid and the spending that those folks are doing. So let's talk a little bit more about that and who are major employers. There's a list of 25 major employers. We'll send this out afterwards. You don't have to read it in detail now. Part of the reason our economy has done so well through this pandemic is that these are the nonprofit or government employers in our community. So the university, the hospital, the school system, the other school system, UNC's physicians, government, these are all organizations that made payroll independent of the quality of our economy, that they continue to pump our university $250 million a month in payroll into our economy, independent of how it was going. We take a look at Chatham County, fewer nonprofit leaders in their economy, but also a very diverse set of folks working there. Again, we can dive into those later. We take a look at employers. These are employers by segment, not employees. And you'll see that in Orange County, it is led by professional, scientific, and technical. It's a thing called other services, healthcare, no surprise, accommodations, and food service. Chatham County is slightly different. They see construction as the second highest number of employers. Let's dive into those employers just a little bit more. There's a thing that the Census Bureau calls employer firms. So there's probably 8,000 businesses in Orange County, but there's only 2,800 of them that are called employer firms. And this will not include the state of North Carolina. So this should not include our university, public school system, and others. And this is where those are located throughout our community. About half of them located in Chapel Hill, 20%, 14% in Hill-Carrboro, and the rest is sort of unincorporated Orange County. Talk a little bit about them. They do about $7 billion worth of sales, $7.7 billion worth of sales. About 50% of that are to organizations in Chapel Hill. We see Hill-Carrboro and we see the rest of the county. But that revenue, when it says sales and shipments and revenue, does not include the university and I believe not our hospital's revenue. So let's take a look at payroll. The total payroll happening in our market is about 1.5 billion, but to give you a sense of scale, the university's payroll exceeds the total combined payroll of all of these other employer firms. And we'll see the university's number here shortly to give you a sense of the wages that are being paid. And this is really what has buoyed our economy and supported substantial retail sales that you'll see in a minute. There's more data on this, but I wanted to share a little bit about minority-owned employer firms. Now, we have lots of minority sole proprietorships. This does not include sole proprietorships. These are folks with employees beyond themselves. You'll see that Durham substantially more, but as you do it as a function of percentages, Orange and Chatham at 12% minority-owned, Chapel Hill at 11%. You'll see Durham just at 18%. Most folks would estimate it would be dramatically higher than in Orange County. Women-owned firms, Hill-Carrboro leads the way. Mayor Lavelle with 33% of all firms in Hill-Carrboro owned by women, higher than the state and local averages. Let's talk a little bit about income. Again, our economic success is that we have the highest per capita income in the state. That is all 100 counties all stacked together. Robeson at the bottom, but Orange in the 1 slot, Chatham in the 2 slot. This is taking all wages, dividing it by all people, but a different way to look at that would be to look at people's tax returns. So this is taking a look at people's adjusted gross income. So this would show household and family income. And you'll see the Orange in the 1st slot, Chatham in the 2nd, and appreciably higher, 30%, 50% higher than the 6th position in Iredale. One other way to show the tremendous revenue in our community, this is tax returns for folks that itemize. $185,000 is the adjusted gross income for an Orange County resident who chooses to itemize, and you can see that compared to some of our neighbors. So with all of that revenue, we've been able to keep our economy running pretty well. Take a quick look at the university. It has huge impact, 30,000 students, more than 13,000 faculty and staff, a budget now exceeding $3.5 billion. Remember, you saw only $1.5 billion total of everybody else's payroll. $500 million of that coming from the state, the rest from other sources. Extraordinary endowment that is up 100-fold over just 30 years ago, 20 years ago. $1 billion in annual research, and these have a $7 to $8 multiplier effect in our local economy. 20 million square feet, 21 million. Y'all, this is about 80% of all the square footage in Orange County. 80% of all the commercial square footage in Orange County on our campus. And a really robust startup economy, $1.5 billion in annual funding to startups. Last year's number, $1.5 billion, a total of $15 billion pushed into these organizations. Take a little bit of land and tax base. Surprisingly, to some of you maybe, 91% of Orange County is unincorporated Orange County. Only 1% of it, I see you, Mayor Jen, is in the municipal city limits of Hill-Carrboro, and you'll see Chapel Hill's there as well. But the way that it functions in terms of talk a lot about commercial versus residential tax base. So here's Chapel Hill, 71% residential, 20% commercial, 10% apartments. I'm pulling the apartments out because we argue in this community about whether apartments count as commercial or residential. They do make some children for our public school system, but they behave like commercial in almost every other way, from collecting their trash in dumpsters to how they pay their taxes. There's Carrboro, Hillsborough, with the most diverse economy in our region. This is the portion of Mebane that is in Orange County. The rest of the county is principally residential. And then you'll see the total county of about an 80-20 split, residential to commercial. Let me show those two in scale. You'll see that the economy, or the commercial property value, of $690 million apartment complexes, or $1.4 billion worth of commercial property value in Chapel Hill, compared to Carrboro's at $200 million, Hillsboro's at $300 million. And then you see the value of the residential property. For orientation, if you could rotate this maybe 15 degrees left, you'd see the entirety of the county. This is all acres valued based on the value of the acre. So you can see Greenbridge is the giant tall thing in Chapel Hill, which is down at the lower end. Hillsboro, you can see off in the distance with Highway 40 and 85 running there, and a little bit of Mebane growing off in the distance. So another way to take a look at the tremendous amount of farmland. And let's talk about that. Our farms are growing. Part of our economy, the number of farms in Orange County is up over time, and their productivity is also up, particularly in sales. Products sold more than $10 million than just a few years ago. A thriving farm economy also in Orange County. I'm not going to say much about housing. Next, one of these briefings, we're going to get into development. We can talk about housing. A word on retail sales. You saw Dr. Walden's numbers. This is a fiscal year. So the fiscal year 1920 would have included several pandemic months. It would have included April, May, June, but it went up. Even with those months, we're approaching $2 billion of total retail sales in Orange County. This is inflation adjusted numbers. And then here's Chatham County, also saw success for the fiscal year. Let's take a look at the actual calendar year. Dr. Walden showed you some of this. This is the month compared to same month last year. So March, April. April down 6% compared to same month last year. May down 20% compared to same month last year. But then we saw real improvements. The October thing is weird. When I take a look, our October, and Dr. Walden had it as September, but we show it anomalously high last year. There's no other year where that October is that big. So I think that there's some anomaly there. So overall, for the calendar year, Orange County retail sales down just 1%. Chatham County is a different story, an extraordinary story. The entire year, they're up 20%. Some people say, well, what is that about? Well, some of it is about the stimulus. Others of it is if 80% of your population leaves your county every morning in a normal economy, and then you lock them at home for a year, they spend their money closer to home. And so Amazon delivering the products to their house counts in these totals, both in the Orange County totals and the Chatham County totals, and it has a huge impact. Grocery, commercial, construction, Amazon have really driven it. It's also the case that we're a community that got stimulus money, but without real job loss. There were folks in tremendous hardship, but in general, most people were employed and getting stimulus, and that has really driven a lot of their shopping. We take a look at this January. This January is 10% better in Orange County than last January. So our pandemic January now is 10% better than pre-pandemic January retail sales. And then here are the rest. Took a look at a few other counties a little bit like us or that are near us, and we're seeing that absolutely everywhere. So where does the sales tax go? I think it's really important as regionalists to remind ourselves that no matter where you live in Orange County sales are distributed with this formula. 59 to the county, 27% to Chapel Hill, 9% to Carrboro, 3%. And there's an itty bitty bit of Durham City inside Orange County, a factoid you can share with friends. But what this means is that when you buy something, here's the actual numbers of retail sales tax distribution, is that in Carrboro, I did the math, Carrboro gets $200,000 a year in sales tax revenue because there is a Walmart in Hill-Carrboro. The Hill-Carrboro Walmart is producing $200,000 a year in sales tax revenue to Carrboro. And for folks in Hill-Carrboro, they are going to get about $130,000 a year because there's a Wegmans in Chapel Hill. So no matter where you buy it in Orange County, it gets distributed this way. But you do have to buy it in Orange County in order to have these funds distributed in this way. It is a regional economy, and businesses moving between the cities would not have impact on this distribution. We have a thing called the Chamber 50 Index. I'm going to share it with you briefly and accelerate. In retail sales, what I showed you is buoyed by Amazon and Harris Teeter. We do the credit card processing for 50 small businesses. It's pizza parlor, massage therapist, restaurant, hotel, auto mechanic, and we can go back in time and see the value of their transactions. These are all the last January. So the three numbers, you see the April big drop. But the current January of the Chamber 50, we'll use that as our little S&P 500, is that while there was a huge drop, we're now back to $1 million a month in transactions, but well off the 1.6 million that we had seen. This is actual swipes. How many credit card swipes were that set of 50 businesses doing? 12,000 2 Januaries ago, 14,000, now just 6,000 swipes. The value of the swipe is up, but number of swipes down. A little bit about commuting. It is pretty remarkable how well our economy has done, despite the fact that we normally, our daytime population is 27,000 more people than our nighttime population. Chapel is about 60,000 folks, and we have 87,000 during the day. Now, when those folks stayed home, losing 27,000 shoppers and customers and folks buying from our restaurants has really been terrible. So commute patterns have make a big difference. In Carrboro, it was to Carrboro's benefit. Carrboro generally is an exporter of workers, and when those workers stayed home, it actually helped the Carrboro economy. The good news for our economic development professionals is the amount of people driving out of the county for work is on the decline, and the amount of people driving into the county, this pre-pandemic, is going up. We'll see what the pandemic holds, but this has been great for our local economy. It's required workers from other places in order to fill, but we're no longer a net exporter. On hotels and tourism, I saw Lori Palicelli here. It's a big part of our economy. This is adjusted for inflation, but it's about $200 million in pre-pandemic times. This has been devastating. This is the general occupancy rates. You see what 2020 was like. Let's look at it by month. This is normally the occupancy rates for our hotels. This was the pandemic occupancy rates for our hotels. Dropped to 13% occupancy. You could swing a cat around in the lobby and not hit anybody. It was pretty empty, but you see that return. That return is good news and bad news. While occupancy is up, the daily rate remains really low. So you multiply occupancy by what you charge for a room, and you'll see that even if occupancy gets back to the same, but the daily rates are down 30%, the revenue won't be there for these organizations. Dr. Walden showed you unemployment. I went all the way back to pre-recession to sort of show you that's 2008 and then 9. So we see that we peaked up, and it took us almost a decade to get back, and then this huge spike, but then a return. We're now at 5 months of under 5%. Now, Dr. Walden is right. People are leaving the workforce. We have 2,000 fewer folks in the denominator of this fraction of looking for work. But it is good news to see this back on track like that. All right, let me share a little bit about a economic conditions survey. When we asked businesses, okay, so since 2008, we've asked the same set of questions. And I'm going to tell you what the results are. So this first, who are they? These are businesses, they're located in lots of places. Let's use Chapel Hill Tire. Chapel Hill Tire would have clicked Orange County, Durham County, Wake County, and Chatham County. So we asked them all the places that they are doing business. And it was very diverse who responded. So 100 businesses, 99 businesses responded, about a third 1 to 5 employees, a third 6 to 50, a third 50 plus. So we asked them, how has the current state of the economy affected your organization? This is the group saying it is positively affecting their organization. Nobody in 2008 and 2009 thought the economy was positively affecting their organization. Then we see how that has changed. 73% saying it was positively affecting their organization. For the last couple of years, flat we now have. But it is still 28% think the economy is positively affecting their organization. This is not as bad, and I'll show you in a minute. It's because everybody's feeling this slightly differently. We asked them, is this negatively affecting your organization? All right. Some people thought so, but we now have almost nobody last year, or the general economy was bad for them. We now have 32% the general economy, but it's only 32%. This is really pretty, and thank you, Jensen, for preparing it. The upshot is that group in the middle that says, whatever, the economy doesn't matter. I'm neutral on what's going on in the economy, and that's still 40%. Saying that whatever going on in the economy isn't having big impact on them. So the key is it's having hugely different effects on everybody else. We gave them a 1 to 10 scale. Was it negatively or positively? Construction, professional services, real estate, government, transportation, arts, communications, there's healthcare, retail, utilities, food service and drinking places. I love that that is a title of a thing. And then, of course, accommodations. So as our board chair, I saw her on here, likes to say, we're in the same storm, but in different boats. In different boats. A third of folks are saying this has been good for them. A third of folks absolutely terrible for them. Third in the middle. Do you expect your sales to increase or decrease? 75% of local businesses are expecting their sales to increase. We thought it's fabulous. We want to run around and high five ourselves about it, but it turns out that for the last 6 years, they always think 75% of our members think their sales are going to increase. And so they're generally optimistic about that. And you'll see those that think it's going to decrease has been the same over time. So at first we were excited about that, but then it turns out that we're always feeling pretty good. And that there's reason to have felt good. They have traditionally increased. Do you plan to add or reduce workers over the next 12 months? Plan to add. This is excellent news, y'all. 52% of folks plan to add workers, 44% plan to do nothing. Only 4% are planning to reduce workers in the coming year. This is a very diverse set of local businesses. This is not scientific, but it is what it is, and it's a similar cohort to previous years. That plan to add workers over time has been as low as 30%, 36%. This is one of the highs of folks intending to pick up workers. That'll be good for those unemployment numbers. To our local government professionals who are here, we've asked this for years. Would you say that local government here is pro-business, neutral, or anti-business? These are last year's numbers, somewhat to vary, and you saw an improvement. So 62% think that you are somewhat or very pro-business. And the really good news is those who think it's very pro-business is at an all-time high. This is from our local government, the county pushing more than $1 million of direct support, the flexibility that local municipalities have been offering, and that is being recognized and rewarded. And it turns out that no matter the size of the business, are they tiny or middle or large, they feel the same about our local government. We don't see a statistical difference about that. We did ask if you could change one thing to help. We're going to share those with our local economic development professionals, but I'm not going to take time to review that right now. All right, so I'm going to stop. Gave it to you. As you know, it comes with a southern accent, but northern speed. To just for a moment. We intend to end it on time. For me, the key upshot is unemployment down with folks re-entering the workforce. Retail sales, even or better, meaning our local governments won't be needing to make cuts based on that. And a ton of revenue coming into local governments from the feds and figuring out how to deal with that. Jensen or Vanessa, we have just put out a survey to you all yesterday, about services and programs that you need now in order to be successful. One of them is, if you had $500,000 to spend to improve the local economy, what would you do with it? Stimulus checks to local businesses, technical assistance and support, coaching and counseling, what is it? But please take the opportunity to complete that survey for us. It'd be really, really helpful. Okay, I see some of you are having to go off to your teaching responsibilities. There's that survey. Click on it before you go. Thank you, Mayor Lavelle. We have a few moments for a few questions.
Yep, Aaron, I'm noting the time, and also there are some questions in the chat. Generally about, there's a lot of interest in migration patterns and what that might mean for a local small urban area like a Chapel Hill or a Hill-Carrboro. We're seeing questions about the residential versus commercial split in our local economy, and is there a good balance? So I guess for the sake of time, maybe what I'll do is just ask both Aaron and Dr. Walden if you just have any final thought that you'd like to leave our audience as they go forward. If they heard nothing else from what you had to say today, what would be one last piece of information to share? And I'm sorry to be putting you on the spot, but if you're flexible to do that.
And then maybe Dr. Walden macro.
Okay.
We are late into recessions locally, and we are first out. And all previous, late in, first out. All of the fundamentals of Orange County and the surrounding are still right. People have the revenue. Our businesses, some of them did go out of business, but many of them survived. Doubling down on local, reinvesting resources back into the community, a powerhouse university research and healthcare system that should drive us to great success and continue the forward growth with this pretty big bump in a road, but back to a smoother thing in the future. Dr. Walden?
And from the macro point of view, we are improving, but the post-pandemic economy will be different than the pre-pandemic economy. We are not going to have the same economy, and particularly in the labor market. The labor market is going to be very different, and it's going to be a challenge, I think, to reskill many people who will find they need to be reskilled, particularly those at the lower rungs of the economic ladder, unfortunately. So we're going to have a challenge in the state to find those folks, be proactive, match them up with jobs. I think we'll need a lot of collaboration between our educational institutions, our fabulous educational institutions, and the business community, so that we can manage that migration, if you will, of folks from one set of jobs to another set of jobs.
Wasn't that terrific? I hope you all captured several key insights. Oh, sorry, Aaron?
Just a quick thank you before your final wrap, and that is to all of you for your membership. You fund this organization. We know that we were funded last year by organizations in crisis. 90% of our members continue to reinvest their membership dollars with us, which makes it, it's just an exceptional support that you all showed. You've hired us, we work for you. We wanted to say thank you for the support over this last year, and that we're going to continue to deliver great things for you all in the year to come. Katie?
Thanks, Aaron, and thank you, Dr. Walden, for terrific presentations today. I hope everyone here was able to capture some great insights that really help you make sense of our current economy, and maybe even help you make some risk-adjusted decisions for the path forward for your business. I really want to give a heartfelt thank you to Dr. Walden and Aaron for these outstanding presentations. We will share them on our SlideShare account. You'll get a link to that in the follow-up email. I also want to thank our sponsors who made today's forum possible: Chapel Hill Media Group, Duke Energy, and Durham Tech. As I mentioned at the start of the meeting, when we send the follow-up email, we'll also encourage you to tune in to 97.9 The Hill today around 4:30, when Brighton McConnell will air an interview with Dr. Walden and Aaron on these key takeaways. And you can go to chapelboro.com later today for my article, which will summarize the findings. We hope you will join us next month for our next forum. It's going to be a regional economic development forum on April 22nd. We'll send you the link. Registration is open. And again, this is free for chamber members. As always, if you'd like to learn more about becoming a chamber member, just go to our website or give us a call. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.